Namaskar and welcome viewers. You're with me, Surbhi Unyal, and I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. We are doing a special lecture series on Introduction to Philosophy, and in this series we have done various schools under the Indian systems. In today's lecture, we would be doing Nyāya Philosophy. So Nyāya school was founded by sage Gautama. He is also known as Akshapad. And the term Nyāya, it literally means the rule or method of reasoning. So if we go by the etymology of the term Nyāya, then it literally means a method of reasoning. And therefore, Nyāya means argumentation, and it suggests that the system is predominantly, it is intellectual, it is analytic, logical and epistemological. And on the basis of this, it has been given various names. Since it is, intellectual, or it is analytical, it's logical. So it has been also called as Tark Shastra. And Tark Shastra basically means the science of reasoning. It is also known as Praman Shastra, or the science of logic and epistemology. It is also known as Hetu Vidya, and Hetu Vidya means the science of causes. It is also known as Vad Vidya, which is the science of debate. And lastly, it is also known as Anvikshiki, or the science of critical study. So these are the various names that have been associated with the school based on what it emphasizes upon. So since this school predominantly emphasizes upon reasoning, it predominantly emphasizes on logic, on epistemology, therefore it has been given these various names, be it Tark Shastra or Praman Shastra or Hetu Vidya, Anvikshiki and so on. So Nyāya system is a atomistic pluralism and its logical realism. It is allied to Vaisheshika system. We have discussed this point in our previous lecture where we talked about Vaisheshika school, and there we have elaborately discussed that how and why this school is allied to the Vaisheshika system. Since it shares since these two schools shares each other's metaphysics and epistemology, therefore they are considered to be allied schools. And within this, Vaisheshikas, they develop metaphysics and ontology, while the Nyāyikas, they develop logic and epistemology. So the focus of Vaisheshika school was mainly on metaphysics and ontology, while the Nyāyikas, they have focused elaborately on logic and epistemology. Vaisheshikas, they share epistemology of Nyāya, and Nyāya shares the metaphysics of Vaisheshikas. Though there are certain differences between Vaisheshikas and Nyāyikas, yet overall if you look at their philosophies, you can see various overlaps, and that's why they are considered to be allied systems. Now Nyāya philosophy, it recognizes categories which are 16, and the first category is known as Praman, which focuses on the logical and the epistemological character of the Nyāya system. Fine, so out of various categories which we had, if you remember, we had done in Vaisheshikas, in Nyāya there are 16 categories, and within those 16 categories, the first one is Praman, and this Praman, it focuses on the logical and the epistemological characteristics. It professes that there are 4 independent praman. Okay, and praman, what is a praman? Pramans are basically the sources of valid knowledge. Fine, and within those sources of valid knowledge, Nyayikas consider 4 valid sources of knowledge. And those 4 valid sources of knowledge are perception, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony or shabd. So these are the 4 valid pramans or the 4 valid sources of knowledge which have been accepted by the Nyaya system. Now, since Nyaya is predominantly epistemological, or you can say focusing upon its epistemological aspects, so let us now discuss what is Nyaya epistemology. Now, interpreting the term knowledge, since epistemology is the study of knowledge, so in interpreting the term knowledge, Nyayikas, they say that it may be treated as cognition, apprehension, consciousness, or manifestation of objects. Since Nyaya was a realist, they believe that knowledge reveals the object and the subject which are quite distinct from itself. So, in a way, it is revealing both the subject and the object. Even though subject and object are quite distinct from each other, yet the purpose of knowledge is to reveal both the subject and the knowledge, the subject and the object in the knowledge. All knowledge basically is a revelation, or you can say a manifestation of objects. And what do we really mean by manifestation of objects? Let us try to understand it with the help of an example. So just like how a lamp manifests physical things placed before it, similarly knowledge also reveals all objects which comes before it. And in that sense we can say that knowledge also is a kind of manifestation, or it manifests the object, just like how a lamp manifests the physical things that are placed before it. In the similar manner, knowledge also reveals the objects which come before it, or in a way you can understand it by saying that knowledge is revealing that object which is the object of knowledge. Fine, so it's a manifestation. Now, knowledge could be of 2 types according to the Nyayikas. It could be valid or it could be invalid. Valid knowledge is called prama and invalid knowledge is called aprama. Fine. So, valid knowledge, be clear that it is known as prama, and invalid knowledge is called aprama. So, valid knowledge, which is prama, is defined as right apprehension of an object. Fine. So, if you have to describe what do we really mean by valid knowledge, or what is prama? So, prama is the right apprehension of an object, which is known as yatharth anubhav. So, it has to be the right apprehension. So, it is the manifestation of an object as it is. So, the characterization of valid knowledge is a consequence of correspondence theory of truth. And what is this correspondence theory? The theory of correspondence, it states that truth is the correspondence between the proposition and the reality. Thus, valid knowledge is treated as presentative knowledge. Again, a very important point, that valid knowledge is treated as presentative knowledge. It is never a representative knowledge. It's only a presentative knowledge. Fine. And the theory of correspondence, let us spend some time on understanding what is the correspondence theory of truth. According to the correspondence theory of truth, the proposition that you are stating, it becomes true only if it corresponds to the reality. So what's there in the reality and what you are speaking, or the proposition that you are uttering, when it corresponds with the reality, so when it is the same in a very general terminology, when the proposition that you are stating is the same as to what there is in the reality, that is known as correspondence theory of truth. So, if I am uttering a sentence or a proposition, and if that proposition corresponds to the reality, then my statement turns out to be true, or it would be a true statement. So, these Nyayikas, since they are realists, they accept the correspondence theory of truth. That means that things are there in the world, okay, objects are there in the world, and when we are uttering any proposition, when it corresponds to what is there in the world, that's known as correspondence theory of truth. So, valid knowledge, as per the Nyayikas, valid knowledge is a consequence of that correspondence theory of truth. So, for them, what is, the truth should correspond to the reality. And in that continuation to that, they say that valid knowledge should be treated as a presentative knowledge and not as representative knowledge. So, the Nyayikas, they maintain that the theory of correspondence is paratah pramanyavad, and in order to be valid, it must correspond to the reality. So, the pramanyavad which the Nyayikas are accepting is paratah pramanyavad. Fine. So, you have to look for the external sources for it to be valid. Now, valid knowledge is produced by 4 valid means. We have just discussed that Nyayikas, they accept 4 pramans, or the 4 valid means of knowledge, and those 4 valid means of knowledge are perception, inference, comparison, and testimony or verbal testimony. Only when we get knowledge from these 4 valid means can we get valid knowledge. So, valid knowledge, which is prama, can only be attained through these 4 valid praman. Fine. So, in order to reach or in order to get prama, we need to follow or we need to accept these 4 valid means, which are the praman. So, from praman, if we accept or if we are getting knowledge from perception, inference, comparison and testimony, since they are valid praman, we will get valid knowledge, which is prama. But then what is invalid knowledge? If these are valid knowledge which we have gathered from these various sources, then what is invalid knowledge? Invalid knowledge is defined as wrong apprehension of object. Fine. So, in contrast to valid knowledge, which was the right apprehension of object, invalid knowledge is defined as wrong apprehension of objects. And these invalid knowledges, they include memory, which is smriti, doubt, which is samasya, error, which is viparyaya, and hypothetical reasoning, which is tark. So, these are defined as, or these are considered to be invalid knowledges because they are wrong apprehension of the object. They're not the right apprehension. Fine, and this shows that how Nyayikas, they not only discuss the valid knowledge, but they have also told us that what is not to be considered as knowledge. Fine, so invalid knowledge is if you are getting it from your memory or from doubt or error and hypothetical reasoning, then it wouldn't be considered as a knowledge. In fact, it would be considered as invalid knowledge or aprama. But why are we saying that these are not to be considered as valid knowledge? Why are they considered to be invalid knowledges? So memory is not presentative, but it is representative knowledge. And we discussed that one of the defining features of valid knowledge is that it should be presentative knowledge. Since memory, it is not presentative, it cannot be considered to be as a valid knowledge. So this is representative knowledge. So memory can also consider as a source of valid knowledge, provided it is recalled or remembered were experienced in the past as presentative cognition. But since it's representative knowledge, therefore it is not considered to be a knowledge in the present moment. Doubt, we know that doubt cannot be a knowledge in itself. Why? Because we lack certainty on cognition. So if you have doubt about something, it would definitely not be called as knowledge. Fine. So if you are stating some fact and you're saying that, I really doubt about it, it wouldn't be taken so seriously, because we know that we have a doubt in this statement and it does not have certainty. Maybe it turns out to be something else. So doubt cannot be considered as knowledge because there is lack of certainty. Error, then error is, it is misapprehension of what is cognized. For example, a snake is mistakenly cognized as a rope. So here we know that's not a knowledge because it is misapprehension. Then comes tark. Tark is considered as invalid knowledge because it does not produce any new knowledge. It only confirms what one already knows earlier. So that makes it as a representative in nature. Since again it is not presentative, it is representative, therefore it cannot be considered as a valid knowledge and becomes an invalid knowledge. So you're not producing anything new, you are just stating what have been already known or already been talked about. So it's just a representative in nature, which makes it as an invalid knowledge. Now, according to Nyāya, knowledge is produced when the soul or the consciousness, it comes into the contact with objects that are external to it. Okay, and these objects which are external to it, they are referred to as not soul or no soul in a sense. So knowledge is considered as as a property or adventitious property of the soul, meaning that it arises as a result of interaction between the soul and the object. So, as we have already discussed that there are two types of knowledges, valid, invalid, and we have also discussed what comes under valid knowledge and what comes under invalid knowledge. Here we come to know that how at all do we get knowledge, or how is this knowledge possible? Fine, and they are saying that it is possible when there is a contact of the soul with the objects which are considered to be as not self. So there is a contact between soul and not soul. that give rises to the knowledge where we are trying to learn about the external objects. So we will continue our discussion on Nyāya epistemology in our next lecture. So please stay with us, and we will discuss various other aspects of knowledge, and we will also talk about various means or different praman which are accepted by Nyāya philosophy. So thank you viewers for staying with us and watching our videos. Do watch our next video to follow up on the other concepts that we would be doing. Thank you.